Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Gary Holt from Exodus and formerly from Slayer, and you're listening to The Razor's Edge.
Thanks for joining, and obviously discuss the record that you've got coming out. In Absence of Light is the title, and it comes out next Friday, 27th of January, and it's being released via Church Ride Records. Really just kind of initial interest in the writing process for this. So if I'm correct, the material from basically the demo material that came out in November 21 is used towards this album. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
As well as that, I mean, obviously, as well as using that material, how much prior to the demo being written was kind of set in stone of the other tracks, or was it a case of complete clean slate once that was out that you had to really continue writing towards the album?
No, so I think to be fair, once the first three tracks we went in and recorded, say November 21 sort of time. We've often kind of, when writing together, it's been a process of the songs that we've worked on most recently then sort of inform the direction or help us kind of map, chart a course to the next set of songs. So although there was riffs and ideas and concepts being worked on and things being spoken about, once those three songs have been written and recorded, we then had free reign to look at what the material we had. Did we scrap it? Did we start again, keep bits of it, and then build the next part? Because you kind of, you get an atmosphere and an idea and a feeling before you go and record, but it only becomes fully realised once you're in the studio, once you get the sounds together and you get the atmospheres and the bits that are unfinished before you go in, the arrangements, then the songs sort of come to life and become almost completed in the studio. So once we've done that for those first three songs, it kind of gave us, I guess, more of an idea of what we were looking to do to shape the next set of songs that we came into. So of those, the other tracks that you hear on the album were part written, and there was bits and bobs of it, but I think they were fully realised once we've been in for those to record the first bit. So it's a bit unusual, I think, to record an album in two segments, but it sort of really worked for us in kind of giving us the space of having those three songs and then making sure, if you like, the atmosphere and the feel of those three wasn't lost when it came to putting the rest of the album together, and we were able to kind of expand on it. And that's partly why it made sense to do the running order that we did for the album, which was like a natural progression of sound and style. We felt from those first three into the next four songs that make up the In the Absence of Light album.
With the with obviously doing it in that way, did you find by having that time to basically to regroup your thoughts and work on that second batch of songs, did that process take I mean, I know there's obviously more songs you recorded, but did you find it a longer process in the studio, or because you had a really good idea of it, did things run maybe a bit smoother and a bit faster when you were working through them?
So I think we, myself and Lee, did quite a lot of work between ourselves, like outside of the studio, if you like, passing ideas forward and backwards that help formulate where we're going to go with the full length track. So, but as we were saying, the songs themselves sort of come together in the studio as a final product. But we like to put a bit of pressure on ourselves by having quite tight, it almost like restricts our recording time, because it fuels and inspires the inspiration in the studio to finish off those bits and to come up with a kind of extra last sort of touch creative moments. But we were aware of when we were recording, and we had a period of 6 months to work on the next batch of songs to complete the album. We sort of used it as we normally would by coming in with things, a very clear idea of what we wanted to do, but maybe not everything was fully finished because we had the ideas of how to finish it off. We're going to work through that when we're in the studio for the second time. But so if you want to come in, Leo, on any of those bits that sort of the interim gap between the two sort of segments to it.
Obviously, you've mentioned about the creating the atmospheres within the album. When you're blending the styles that you do together, the death metal elements and the doom elements, what do you feel is the most important? Basically, the key things that you need to do musically to create that style, because it's two styles that work really, really well together when they're done right. Yet if they're done wrong, it's you can tell. What do you guys feel is the most important? And likewise, what is it that you as a band feel that you excel at? Is there a particular type? Is there basically a particular thing that you guys feel that you excel at in your songwriting processes?
In terms of the songwriting process, for us, we're very much slaves to where the music's taking us. It sounds ridiculous, but in the very early stages of writing a song, whether it's a song that may start with a faster riff or a slower idea or whatever, we really are led by that. There are no rules as far as we're concerned. We have very, very strict and ruthless comes to the songwriting element. So for us, when we feel we're on the right direction, that's really for us matter whether it's what the tempo is for us. And at this stage of the development of music, heavy metal music, and so on, I don't see great differences, enormous differences between, say, doom metal, death metal, black metal, and so on, all the subgenres. For me, if you were to see them written out in notation, there would be less difference there. I think tempo dictates which subgenre you're referring to there. But you are right, it does have to link together well. Otherwise, it seems, I've certainly witnessed it being fudged together, and it just, well, for us, we spend a huge amount of time in the creative process refining the song so that different, individual parts work well together and fit together, rather than just a endless parade of riffs, which it gets pretty monotonous for a listener. I think we really do craft those songs within an inch of their lives, and that's actually what takes the time, to be honest. Coming up with riff ideas and song ideas and concepts and themes, song titles, lyrics, for us is easy. The real work is crafting that song into something we ourselves are happy with, and something that the listener can be a lot of pleasure from as well.
And I think the bit you talk about, what's the USP and what's the focus of it, is that bringing it all together. So it's the overall atmosphere, the overall kind of emotional response, but also the kind of the listening journey that you go on, both from us creatively listening back to our own things, but also we want the listener to go in and be interested in and to be taken along by it. You're kind of almost creating a horrible, dark atmosphere through the medium of music, rather than through a horror film or through some sort of cinematic visual approach. And it's just a different instruments and different ways to sort of put that art across, but it does have to tell some sort of story or take you on some sort of journey, capture you from point A, take you to point C through various different ways of doing it, or else it just isn't interesting. I think there's a million bands over the last 30 years that can blast for 2.5 minutes and do it better than we can. But when you introduce a blast at the right time, or when you introduce a grind bit or a doom bit in a way that enhances or improves or takes a song somewhere else, somewhere interesting, or somewhere darker, or somewhere challenging, or interesting, I think that's, for us, is the really exciting and kind of the spark for us in the creative process is finding ways to do that, and finding ways to do that perhaps slightly differently, but within, I guess, there's the death doom genre isn't the widest kind of sphere of influence. It's not suddenly going to be dropping trip hop bits in there, but finding ways to keep it interesting and to keep that kind of for us as writers and people listening as well.
Yeah, there's enough bands. I think the message there is from us is that there are more than enough bands out there who do one thing and do it spectacularly well, and we love that stuff too. It's just not what we enjoy writing and performing and recording and so on. We do try and do something a little bit different, which hopefully people will enjoy and be able to take as it's intended, which is to be something a little different from the norm.
So working with Church Road Records, they're releasing is it a CD and a tape variant of the album?
Yes, yeah.
With obviously we're seeing a lot more labels release multi-formats of releases. So you'll have labels who are releasing vinyl and CD and tape. Is that do you feel that more positive in basically record sales? I know that it's been for a long time more geared towards streaming, but it does seem to be an uptake of multiple formats being pressed. Do you feel that's a positive sign for artists that they're actually going to be seeing more physical sales and therefore essentially getting more financial support from these sales?
Possibly. I think the bit for us that is important is that it clarifies and confirms it's an album. You know, it's not a series of singles or a selection of songs. It kind of reinforces that album, and that for us is really, really important. You know, kind of all messing around and joking aside, I'm not a playlist or a singles listener. You know, there's an investment in an album as a concept and as a format that I particularly enjoy and particularly think is an art. You know, the as Lee mentions, the time we spend on things like concepts around titles, but also track listing and how a form of music flows for 50 odd minutes and how it can keep you telling different stories across that time. So I think the what's the word? The ask of us, you know, for there to be physical formats of it was in line with that reinforcement of an album, as you know, something that we've always gone back to as our preference in how we sort of digest and listen to this sort of music. So.
And also there's something that we're keen to do, perhaps if there's a vinyl pressing of this album, but certainly for the second album will be, you know, you can get artistic with the different formats and produce different album covers for each format and make it a creative exercise as well, rather than a purely commercial side, you know. So there is something to satisfy your creativity by releasing on multiple formats rather than just the numbers.
And I think the final bit as well is it's almost like a realization of some of the elements on your bucket list, if you like, as a musician, as an artist, in that releasing on cassette, as us growing up buying our albums in the 90s, that was, you know, a very popular format back then, and it's not necessarily something I thought that would be able to do, because, you know, cassette as a format died out. But I think it's a nice collectible, you know, from that side of things as well. So that definitely piqued the interest when the idea, Church Reflect, the idea of releasing on cassette, we're all over that. I think is a bit of a touch of nostalgia, but also something different to sort of, you know, to some of the standard releases, or it just being digital. I think having a physical copy then was important for us.
And Church Road are just very, very good at that stuff. You know, that's kind of the main point, is that they do a lot of it. They were full of fantastic ideas on what we could do to make it different, so on. And plus, people love to collect. I do. I just spent far too much money on a Cross box set. I didn't need it. I have all the albums, but I bought it, you know, because I love collecting the stuff for bands that I love. And that's, you know, people are more and more keen to do that these days. Whereas I suppose in years gone by, you were very restricted. You know, you might be able to get it on the, you know, on CD only or tape only, or perhaps you had it on all the formats. The artwork was the same. You know, there's more choice these days. I think that's a good.
With regard to going back to the album and the writing process, what are the basically what did you touch on lyrically with the album and the writing of the lyrics for it?
So yeah, so part of it for myself, from a selfish point of view, is when coming up with lyrics, is always to try and do something different to what I've done before, try and put myself into different mindsets or different kind of approaches to it. So I've taken a variety of approaches in the past of fully realised stories and concept arcs and so on. But generally it's about being led by the atmosphere of the music and helping to create, I guess, further embellishments and further bits that fully realise that, you know, that artistic feel, that atmosphere of everything. So I'm always aware of that, always mindful, particularly in this sort of music. I mean, we grew up with Paradise Lost, with My Dying Bride. There's a certain poetry, there's a certain romantic kind of yearning and feeling that is in a lot of the lyrics that, you know, the Peaceful Three and the related bands that we grew up listening to, and absolutely underpin everything that we do musically. So it was referring back to those, but trying to do it in a way that, I said, challenge myself slightly. And I don't necessarily think the concepts or the lyrics and the stories are things that would necessarily be interesting for everyone for me to talk through, but it was around challenging myself to review certain parts of my life and certain decisions and certain kind of journeys and crossroads and where I've been that have taken me to places where I felt I needed to change in myself. And then trying to reflect that in a way that fitted with the musical style. You know, that was what I took from the atmosphere of the music that was coming through. A period of reflection, a period of kind of repentance, or what a better phrase, and a period of renewal. And those sort of 3 stages in that journey was what was trying to be reflected in the lyrics, but without putting too much of an obvious story or a tell as to what that is, either for me or to try and, I was definitely trying not to lead anyone listening or interested in reading the lyrics into making any assumptions to what those, you know, paths or decisions were, but hopefully to raise a point of reflection for people, you know, to recognise in themselves at certain points we have really key decisions to make as to who we are and who we want to be and what we need to do to change our situations. So there's those reflections, certainly a lot more personal than I've allowed myself to be in terms of creative processes before, and that was quite difficult, because to get to that place without becoming trite or cheesy, I find can be quite difficult. But to try and reflect that back in a use of language that reflected the mood of the music, in the end was ultimately enjoyable, though there was definitely some difficult and challenging points for me in how I wanted to sort of phrase and get things across. But
yeah, the lyrics, from where I sit in the band, which is purely on a musical side, lyrics for me are a massive strength for the band. Time and trouble to look into them and read through them. We're definitely on a mission to bring back some of that poetic element to lyrics. That's something that I think there's huge potential for in our music, and we'll continue to do that.
I mean, basically, final question from me is basically about potential for the band to do. What's the plan to promote the release? I mean, are you actively pursuing live performances, or is it strictly at the moment a project that's going to be more focused on just writing and recording?
So I think that the music will always, like the recorded music, will always come first. I think our focus is on that creative process. We're already waist deep in working through ideas for a second album and how that sounds and what we want that to be, and how we want that to be different from what is going to be released next week, but also a continuation. So we've got those, you know, as key reference points. So that is always for us. I mean, myself and Nick have always been around the next song or the next set of songs or the next album, the next release. I remember seeing an article with Devin Townsend saying, like, he releases an album and then he's really frustrated because he has to go and tour it for 2 years. And we've never wanted to trap ourselves with that. When we're ready to move on to the next creative piece, we're ready to. But we do also want to represent us in a live environment. We're talking about how that will work and what the best way to do that is, and we're much more around, I suppose, select and profile appearances, whether that's key support slots or ideally a couple of, you know, hand selected festivals if their vision of having us on matches our vision of being there. But that for me, I think, is where we'd be looking to do, you know, ideally sort of 3 or 4 really key, really important for us showpiece live performances a year, and then to present the songs that way. But we're part of it on us as to how we can make it slightly more interesting than just being 4 people standing in a dark room with some lights on us playing music back at people. So there's that balance as well. So the challenge for us is how to make it a live performance, not necessarily interesting, but more special than just the kind of playing back of what we've recorded.
I'd presume, because obviously there's a lot that goes into music in the background, there's going to be more to obviously sorting a live performance than just playing. There's going to be more added, I say, ambience, basically behind the music to try and really lift the songs in a live format. Would I be right in that kind of assumption?
Yeah, these are the sorts of things that we're kicking around at the moment, really, because whilst we do take a step at a time, there's no grand plan at the moment. You know, we want to make the gigs that we play really special. And as you rightly say, there's actually a lot of texture, layers, atmosphere that goes into the album. And we don't want to lose that. We're absolutely blessed to have a good friend of ours help with music that's that kind of realm. And whether we find a way to bring him into the live setup or whether we, you know, go about it a different way, we're not too sure yet. Really, I think that's the answer. But one thing we're certain of is that strip away all the atmospherics and the extra production that we put onto our record, we know that the music is powerful, dark enough to transcend in the live environment. So we've got no real concerns about that. However we go around doing it is what's up for discussion at the minute. So, we're really excited to do live shows, and of course, when the decision's made on that, it will be an absolute pleasure to share that with everybody. Now it's just kind of making sure that it's right and not rushing into anything. There's a lot of bands on the road at the moment. There's a lot of bands out there in the music scene. So we're in no rush. We've got total confidence in what we do. When we round to it, will be the right time, really.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the ethos that comes through in the writing as well, is that we might put pressure on ourselves in terms of setting our recording times to be quite tight to give us the inspiration to finish off what we've got. But the creative process and the getting there is about getting it right before we're at the point of having that final product available for other people. It's a lot of time and thought that goes into it. So we wouldn't want to throw it away by heading out and doing a series of pub shows that aren't going to benefit either us or the people watching. I think it's a key aspect for us. It has to be and feel that we've considered everything and we've got it right for how we want to present the music and the material. But as Lee says on the back of that, while being very confident that if we strip it down to 4 people playing live in a room, that we absolutely have the atmosphere and the power and the depth in the songs to be able to do that. It's just that we'd like to think there's different ways we can present it to really enhance it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. Is there anything else that you'd like to just add toward the end of the interview at all? But I just want to say thank you for taking your time out to talk to us.
No, it's absolutely great. So thanks from us to you for the interest and for the support you've really shown by sharing the information around the record beforehand and having today's catch up. Just want to say that we feel a bit humbled and really grateful that people we wanted to work with in Church Road shared the same vision with us and helping us to kind of realise that and get that out to the people in a very sort of credible and very supportive way. So we feel things have gone better than expected so far. I'm really happy with the build up to the album. And let's see what happens next Friday, when In the Absence of Light is out there, and then we can see how the sort of the public response to it is. But feeling very optimistic, which, considering a lot of the music's quite dark and reflective, it's an interesting headspace to be in, to be very optimistic about the future for it. So.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you keep up to date with future episodes by subscribing to our channels. For more information on this podcast, or for all the latest music news, reviews, interviews and more, head over to our website, www.therazorsedge.rocks.